Imagine being so funny that presidents call you a genius, so beloved that you raise $2 billion for sick children, so talented that France declares you a national treasure. Then imagine dying estranged from your own sons, despised by former collaborators, your greatest film locked in a vault because it's too controversial to release. That's Jerry Lewis, the man who made the world laugh for 60 years, but couldn't laugh at his own reflection. And by the end, nobody was laughing with him anymore. March 16th, 1926, in Newark, New Jersey, Joseph Levitch was born. His parents were both in vaudeville, Danny Lewis, a master of ceremonies, and Rachel Brodsky, a piano player. Sounds glamorous. It wasn't. They were broke, on the road constantly, barely scraping by. The young Joey was often left with relatives or in boarding houses while his parents toured. He was lonely, desperate for attention, for love. And here's where the pattern started. Joey learned early that being funny got him the attention his parents never gave him. By age 5, Joey was performing with his parents. By 15, he dropped out of high school to pursue show business full-time. Changed his name to Jerry Lewis. Easier to pronounce, more American. Through the 1940s, he worked the nightclub circuit doing a lip-sync comedy act. He was talented but struggling, just another comic trying to break through. Then, in 1946, at the Glass Hat Club in New York, everything changed. Jerry met Dean Martin. Dean was a singer, handsome, smooth, everything Jerry wasn't. They started performing together almost as a joke. Dean would sing, Jerry would interrupt with slapstick chaos. The chemistry was instant, explosive, electric. And this is where Jerry Lewis became a star. Martin and Lewis became the biggest comedy team in America. By 1948, they were everywhere. Nightclubs, radio, then television on the Colgate Comedy Hour. In 1949, they signed with Paramount Pictures. Between 1949 and 1956, they made 16 films together. Box office gold. Jerry was the manic kid. Dean was the straight man. Audiences couldn't get enough. But here's what nobody saw. Jerry was a control freak. Obsessive. Had to control every aspect of their act, their films, their careers. Dean was easygoing, wanted to sing, have fun. Jerry wanted perfection, wanted creative control, wanted to be more than just the funny sidekick. Like the partnership that looked effortless on screen was toxic behind the scenes. But here's the truly shocking part. Jerry started believing his own myth, thought he was a genius, started lecturing Dean about comedy, about acting, about everything. Dean, who'd been performing since he was a teenager, who had natural charisma Jerry could never match, was being talked down to by his partner. The resentment built. By 1956, after 10 years together, Dean had enough. The partnership ended. Martin and Lewis split. America was shocked. Jerry was devastated and furious, because Jerry needed Dean more than Dean needed Jerry. Dean went solo, became a massive star. Rat Pack, Vegas, films, music. Smooth, effortless, beloved. Jerry went solo too, and he was successful, huge even. The Bellboy in 1960, which Jerry wrote, directed and starred in. You, the Nutty Professor in 1963, his masterpiece. Through the 1960s, Jerry was one of the biggest box office draws in the world. France declared him a genius of physical comedy, gave him the Légion d'honneur. But something was wrong. Jerry's films were increasingly about control. He directed himself, wrote himself into every scene, made himself the center of everything. His characters were often pathetic man-children who needed women to save them or authority figures to approve of them. Jerry's on-screen persona, the spastic, needy man-child, wasn't entirely an act. That was Jerry, desperate for validation, unable to accept criticism, convinced of his own genius. In the early 1950s, Jerry became involved with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, started hosting the annual Labor Day telethon in 1966. For decades, Jerry Lewis and the MDA telethon were synonymous. He'd cry on camera, plead for donations, perform for hours, raised over $2 billion over his lifetime. It made him a saint in many people's eyes. But if you talk to people with muscular dystrophy, many hated him. Jerry referred to them as Jerry's kids, talked about them with pity, not respect, used outdated, offensive language, treated them like objects of charity rather than human beings with agency. By the 2000s, disability rights activists were protesting the telethon, saying it perpetuated harmful stereotypes. In 2011, the MDA quietly removed Jerry as host. He was furious, couldn't understand why people didn't worship him for his charity work. The savior complex had become toxic. Wait, don't miss this detail. In 1972, Jerry made a film called The Day the Clown Cried. It was about a clown in a Nazi concentration camp who leads Jewish children to the gas chambers. Yes, really. Jerry co-wrote it, directed it, starred in it. He thought it would be his dramatic masterpiece. The production was a disaster. Jerry fought with everyone. The film was never released. For decades, Jerry kept the only print locked away, refusing to let anyone see it. He called it his Mona Lisa. Others who saw rough cuts called it unwatchable, offensive, a Holocaust exploitation film disguised as drama. Jerry's ego had led him to make a film about the Holocaust, where he was the tragic hero. Personally, Jerry was a nightmare. Married Patti Palmer in 1944, had 6 sons. He was an absent, controlling, often cruel father. His sons grew up terrified of him. In the 1980s to 90s, several came forward with stories of abuse, physical and emotional. Jerry didn't deny it, said he was doing his best. In his 2011 autobiography, he barely mentioned his sons from his first marriage. When he died in 2017, his will deliberately excluded all 6 sons from his first marriage, disinherited them completely, left everything to his second wife SanDee and their adopted daughter. Even in death, Jerry was punishing his sons for not worshipping him enough. Through the 1980s to 2000s, Jerry's career faded. His films stopped making money. His comedy style, the spastic man-child, felt dated, uncomfortable. But Jerry kept performing, kept insisting he was a genius. Did occasional films, showed up at awards shows, gave interviews where he'd insult modern comedy, insult women comics, insult anyone who questioned him. In a 2000 interview, he said female comedians weren't funny. In 2007, he used a homophobic slur during a telethon. The beloved clown was revealing himself as bitter, bigoted, and cruel. You won't believe this, but Jerry's relationships with former collaborators were all toxic. Dean Martin never spoke to him again after 1956, until a brief reunion on Jerry's telethon in 1976. Awkward, forced, painful to watch. They never reconnected. Dean died in 1995. Jerry expressed no emotion publicly. His longtime director Frank Tashlin ended their collaboration because Jerry was impossible to work with. Actors who worked with Jerry told horror stories of his controlling behavior, his tantrums, his cruelty if you dared suggest a better idea. In his final years, Jerry was on heavy pain medication for chronic back problems. Did interviews where he seemed incoherent, angry. His legacy was being re-evaluated, not as the comedic genius he claimed to be, but as a complicated, often toxic figure whose films revealed deep insecurities and need for control. The man who'd made everyone laugh couldn't stand anyone laughing at him. On August 20th, 2017, at his home in Las Vegas, Jerry Lewis died of natural causes. He was 91 years old. Tributes poured in, presidents, actors, comedians praising his contributions. But quietly, his sons from his first marriage spoke out, talked about the abuse, the abandonment, the cruelty. The man who'd raised billions for sick children had destroyed his own family. The clown who made everyone laugh had made his own sons cry. And this is where the story gets complicated. Jerry Lewis was genuinely talented. The Nutty Professor is a comedy masterpiece. His physical comedy influenced everyone from Jim Carrey to Rowan Atkinson. But his need for control, his inability to accept criticism, his cruelty to those close to him, these things matter too. You can't separate the art from the artist when the artist's flaws are embedded in the art itself. Jerry's characters were always pathetic men seeking validation. That wasn't fiction. That was Jerry, performing his own insecurities on screen for 60 years. The unreleased Day the Clown Cried remains locked away, set to be released in 2024, 7 years after Jerry's death per his instructions. When it's finally seen, it will likely confirm what people suspected. Jerry's ego led him to exploit the Holocaust for his own dramatic ambitions, unable to see how offensive and inappropriate his masterpiece actually was. Today, Jerry Lewis is remembered in complicated ways. In France, still a genius. In America, increasingly as a problematic figure whose charity work doesn't erase his personal cruelty. Watch his films knowing what we know now, and you see it. The desperate need for attention, the barely contained rage, the emotional manipulation. The clown was never really funny. He was crying inside, and he made everyone around him cry too. An empty stage, a microphone stand in a spotlight, a telethon tote board frozen at $2 billion raised, and beside it, 6 empty chairs, one for each disinherited son. If you listen past the recorded applause and laughter, you can hear it. Not the sound of comedy, but the sound of a man who spent 91 years performing for love he never received and never gave. Some people make the world laugh, and Jerry Lewis made the world laugh while making his own world miserable. And that's not comedy, that's tragedy. So how do you remember Jerry Lewis? As the comedic genius who raised billions for charity, or as the controlling, abusive father who destroyed everyone close to him? Share with us in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.